The story begins with the image of a peaceful town. Here, after gaining consciousness, Derek followed an old beggar to apprentice under him. Although he was only an inept one-star mage, the old man's boasting was so extreme that he called himself a grand mage wherever he went. But because he needed knowledge to survive, Derek accepted becoming his servant, ignoring the old man's unpleasant temperament. The old man on the side was also a bit shocked when he saw the scene. Suddenly, Derek's eyes snapped open. The pupil inside had slightly contracted. He gritted his teeth, concentrating all his mana into his hand. That source of power shot out and formed an arrow that sped straight forward. The arrow slammed into a tree and carved a horizontal cut across its trunk. The two of them, teacher and apprentice, silently watched the arrow remain lodged in the trunk before them. The old man was so terrified at the sight that cold sweat broke out on him. So I served the old man in every way. Derek, though drenched in sweat and grime, had a bright look in his eyes and became a one-star mage within a year. A small flame flickered beside a simple hut under the silent night sky. The old man was now completely drunk, holding a bottle and looking up at the sky as he spoke. The noble sons beyond the northern wall of Ebelstein, some reached 3 stars before their coming-of-age ceremony. Derek sat beside him, nibbling bread and listening. That was a realm bloodlines like yours might never reach even in a lifetime, so don't get conceited. Your little tricks will fall before the 2-star barrier, the old man always droned on about lineage. Derek silently stared at the bread in his hand while the old man's grating voice continued. Magic is the privilege of bloodlines. No matter how you struggle, it's useless. He kept nagging me about the insurmountable wall between nobles and commoners. He hung his head, lost in thought, while the old man beside him slept soundly. Perhaps the old man's rant was a longing for things he himself never achieved. Derek lightly turned his head and glanced at the old man's back. That night dragged on, and the dark sky suddenly unleashed a heavy rain. And the next day, returning home, Derek stood silently looking at the body of the old man lying on the ground. I saw that he was dead. His face remained calm as if nothing had happened, showing no trace of grief. His body was bruised as if he'd been beaten. I assumed he had started trouble somewhere and been given a beating. During the rainy night, Derek worked furiously digging with each shovel. Only later did I learn that he had done his best to drag the old man's body away. The old man had been beaten to death by guards. Derek stood in the rain before the old man's crude grave, his expression somewhat clouded. It was said the old man was caught trying to steal a 2-star magic tome from the storehouse. Derek suddenly squeezed his eyes shut. Nobody understood why an unambitious old man would do that. No one knew the reason. A system notification suddenly appeared before Derek. That boastful old man always praised bloodlines. The notification read, "Basic magic learned, choose a primary magic system. This choice is irreversible, for I was never originally from this world." Thus 4 years passed, and the village retained the same ancient, solemn appearance as 4 years before. A woman appeared with a confident posture and expression, Keisha Flameheart. A red banner fluttered in the breeze. The former mistress of the Flameheart Viscountcy had fallen on hard times. Noble by birth, she was a 3-star mage, and many mercenary companies sought to recruit Keisha. Derek recalled the scene of the first time he met her. She stayed in Ebelstein, took commissions from the mercenary company Belden, and taught me, who had joined the mercenaries as a child and only knew 1-star magic. She taught him a great many things. I learned a lot from a 3-star mage like Keisha. Scene change, a tavern appeared, Belden's tears in. Keisha sat opposite Derek, instructing him. As a mage, it's natural to want to advance. Moreover, Derek, as you know, you have the talent to do so. She said to him seriously, but excessive ambition will only slow your progress. Derek simply nodded calmly and replied, "Yes, I will keep that in mind." Keisha folded her arms, stared at him, and commanded, "Now close your eyes and feel your mana." While Derek concentrated on sensing his mana, Keisha continued guiding him. Calmly feel where the mana originates, how it flows, and imagine you are using mana to realize the image in your mind. She folded her arms and watched Derek across from her, deeply focused on sensing his mana. Though her face showed no expression, she felt a bit surprised. Indeed, the innate mana in the boy's body was vast, and perhaps due to much battlefield experience, his mana control was quite steady. As Derek concentrated on feeling the mana, he suddenly opened his eyes wide. Keisha's expression betrayed panic in her eyes. A loud bang exploded in the tavern. The customers, hearing the loud noise, shouted irritably, "What was that? What's that sound? What's going on? Were we attacked? Go outside and check." Derek panted, staring at his palms, ignoring the commotion outside. A hand suddenly grabbed his and pulled him away. Master Keisha hurried ahead of Derek without turning back and said, "Derek, don't say anything, follow me." Everyone rose, seizing weapons and remaining alert while paying no attention to the two of them. "What is it?" There was clearly an explosion. Search carefully, it must be an explosion. Keisha led Derek into a small hidden corner. Looking at her tall back ahead, he timidly called Master. Keisha turned her head slightly to look at him and then warned seriously, Derek, listen carefully to what I say. Upon hearing that Derek felt somewhat anxious, yes, Keisha leaned in toward Derek and said seriously, as you know, nobles are very sensitive about their privileges, and magic is the greatest of those privileges. Her gaze fixed on him. Innate power is seen as a blessing, but it is limited to the nobility. Among commoners, occasionally someone reaches 3 stars. Looking straight at the young man before her, Keisha said seriously, but most of those are people who spent their lives studying magic, whereas what you just used. Then she said something that stunned Derek. It's a 3-star chaotic magic system called Illusory Audition. Thus, I became a 2-star mage at 14. The system panel reappeared. 2-star magic is now accessible. You have learned the 2-star spell Illusory Audition. Derek and Keisha sat silently facing each other on the carriage. Afterwards, Keisha continued to guide me, teaching all kinds of magic and sometimes telling me about the high society she used to belong to. Keisha now wore a beautiful outfit standing opposite Derek. A year passed and Keisha left. 2 mysterious figures appeared. It was said the Elvester Count's family had invited her to be a private tutor. The Elvester Count's family is where the Count alongside Elvester holds sway, so powerful that even the Grand Duke in the capital dares not meddle. He silently looked at her, bowed his head, and sat in the carriage with Keisha as she spoke an offer he couldn't refuse. Through the carriage glass, Keisha merely smiled sadly and raised her hand to bid Derek farewell. Becoming the magic tutor for a noble house of that stature is a great blessing for anyone. And before leaving, Keisha gave me a 2-star spellbook as a parting gift. The system notification reappeared. List of learned spells: 1-star Mana Arrow, 1-star Lightning Discharge, 2-star Fireball, Transmutation Magic, 1-star Light Creation, Chaotic Magic, 1-star Soundproofing, 2-star Illusory Audition, Summoning Magic, 1-star Guiding Spirit Summon, Scouting Magic, 1-star Directional Sense, 2-star True Sight. Derek sat alone in the room and snapped the book shut. Another year passed. He left the book lying abandoned on the bed and strode out of the room. I taught myself 2 more 2-star spells. Derek's face was expressionless and his gaze sharp as a blade at only 16, and I had no intention of stopping there. At Belden's Tears Tavern, a voice called from inside. So Derek, it's been a while. There's finally a commission worth mentioning. Derek sat alone at the bar opposite Jaden and asked, what commission is it, sir? Jaden cheerfully answered, it's a commission from Grand Duke Duplain. Do you understand what that means? With that same cold, unreadable face, Derek glanced at him. Duplain, the Duplain family, why would a place like that come to us? Hearing this, Jaden suddenly lit up, eyes flashing at the thought of money. Kid, does that sound important? Duplain, that place burns money like water. He excitedly grabbed Derek's collar and pulled him close. And kid, if we land this, getting a line to Duplain means plenty of capital for future ventures. Derek brushed off where his shirt had been grabbed and asked, so what do they want us to do? Jaden produced 2 gold coins and said happily, nothing major. They want help clearing magical beasts from the Grand Duke's borderlands. Derek, skeptical, asked just that. Jaden quickly replied, yes, nobles never waffle. He rubbed his chin, thinking, it smells fishy. Such a powerful house hiring mercenaries to exterminate magical beasts. With that thought, Derek turned and began to leave. I'm not doing it, send someone else. Jaden, seeing him go, panicked, hey, wait a second. Derek turned back and coldly left him with one line, call someone else, you know I don't take shady jobs. Jaden, annoyed, said, this kid, fine, I'll do it, but they need a mage specifically. Don't you know it's rare to find mages in the company these days? He put a hand on his hip and said loudly, without you nobody can do it, so I called you. Derek, still indifferent, walked off. Really, you need a mage just to catch a few magical beasts? Whatever, I don't want to get mixed up in trouble. Suddenly he spun, catching something Jaden tossed through the air. Jaden leaned on the counter and laughed. 1 gold coin, this is a deposit, not the full fee. Derek opened his palm and stared at the gold coin in his hand. The faces of Delon, Katarina, and Azeline suddenly appeared. Jaden, seeing this, hurriedly waved and explained, no, envoy sir, this kid is the real deal, he's the best mage I know. Delon ignored Jaden and immediately turned to command. Let's go, this is not a task for children. Katarina suddenly leaned over and whispered something to him. Both of them turned their gazes toward the mysterious young woman accompanying them. Derek's face showed no emotion when someone spoke to him. Your name is Derek, right? Speak up a little. In the rugged natural lands of Grand Duke Duplain's domain, a monster was felled by a magical arrow. Derek's gaze now resembled that of a cold, brutal predator. He decisively sliced off a monster's head with a single stroke. Another monster behind raised an axe, attempting to strike Derek from behind. He nimbly dodged, causing the monster's blow to miss. Derek coldly grabbed the monster by the throat. He summoned a massive amount of magic to tear the creature apart. Throwing the last corpse down until it burned black on the ground, Derek turned and reported coldly, "All done, envoy sir." The three stood stunned. Delon folded his arms and praised, "Well done." The mysterious girl also offered a slight smile when Delon added, "That was a quick cleanup for so many." Night had fallen, and the tavern's warm yellow lights shone brightly. Belden's Tears Tavern now angrily demanded, "Are you planning to be a hunting dog for nobles?" Jaden, furious and nearly lunging onto the table, hurriedly warned, "Peline, calm down, there's a customer." Peline still shouted at Derek in anger, "Even if we're lowly commoners, don't go be a noble's hunting dog." Jaden, looking at his flushed face, calmly said, "Hasn't Derek told you how much this pays?" Peline ground his teeth and asked, "How much? How much to throw away your pride and crawl for the nobles?" Jaden's expression unchanged. "It's not literally crawling through anyone's legs." Then he made a gesture with his hand. Seeing that, Peline grew more annoyed. "What, 1 silver coin?" Jaden simply shook his head calmly. Peline's eyes lit up with greed when he realized the true value was 1 gold coin. He bowed deeply to Jaden and shouted, "Please let me crawl through their ranks." Jaden, flustered, replied, "Kid, can you be quiet? I said it's not literal crawling through legs." Outside, the sky had grown completely dark. Peline had dozed off at the table, drooling everywhere, when a sudden voice sounded. "So how's the commission going?" Derek calmly held his cup and answered, "Nothing special, kill a few goblins and it's done." Jaden added, "First impression was a bit poor, but they seem wealthy, don't they?" Derek lowered his eyes, his face thoughtful. "That's true, but all 3 of them are lying." Jaden turned, searching for something as he asked, "Really?" Derek looked down and replied, "They're envoy from the family. Nobles usually combine 3 traits: youth, strength, diplomacy. They evaluate those, but he had none. The woman claiming to be a scullery maid, I recalled her offering me a towel. Her hands were too clean for hard labor." The call cut him off. Derek looked up at the speaker. Jaden seriously told him, "We're mercenaries. We don't need to probe too deeply into who hires us. Just do the job and take the pay." Derek coldly replied, "Yes." Jaden looked kindly at the 2 kids. "Uncle Jaden's right. This is wild land, and in the wild, food and clothes matter most. Everything else is secondary." The next day, a vast domain appeared. Grand Duke Duplain's territory. Derek turned, sheathed his sword, and calmly told everyone, "It's all cleared. At this rate, the goblins won't dare come around for a while." Delon praised, "Well done, you've worked hard." Jaden cheerfully said, all right, so how will the rest of the payment be settled?" 2 shiny gold coins were held up high. Jaden took the 2 gold coins and merrily tossed them at Derek's head to his disgruntled look. Derek glanced. 2 gold coins, a full 2 gold, this much is. Derek was speechless. "Put them down and speak, uncle." Old Delon suddenly cleared his throat to draw attention. Then he frowned, though somewhat displeased. He still said, "Derek, I highly value your abilities and want to offer another commission. What do you think?" The 2 listened in surprise and looked up at him. Delon continued, "The Grand Duke's household will pay 15 gold coins for this commission." Jaden, hearing that, was taken aback. 15 gold. Delon looked directly at Derek and asked, "Will you take it?" Derek answered seriously, "Yes." The carriage carrying them gradually drove away. The carriage finally reached its destination. A magnificent palace appeared, the Duplain Grand Duchy's estate, Duplain Manor. Jaden stepped down and looked up in awe. "Is this the Duplain Grand Ducal family? It's magnificent." Delon said to the 2, "Before we enter, let me reintroduce myself." Jaden happily replied, "Yes, oh my, we've been together all day, please go ahead." Delon looked at them seriously and introduced himself. "I am Delon, the steward of Duplain Manor. Apologies, due to the nature of my work I had to conceal my identity." Jaden, hearing this, couldn't hide his slight displeasure. "Oh my, well then." The woman politely spoke up, "I am Katerina, head housemaid of the Grand Duke's Manor." Jaden flusteredly bowed to them and said, "Oh my, how could such high-ranking figures be so informal? I'm Jaden, leader of the Belden Mercenary Company." Derek said nothing but coldly thought, not an envoy but the steward, not a scullery maid but the head housemaid. I'd guess they weren't ordinary, but this is on another level. A pair of feet stepped down from the carriage. Both turned to look. Jaden curiously asked, "And who might that be?" The mysterious girl had removed her hood. Her long hair fluttered lightly in the wind. Derek was momentarily stunned at the sight. The mysterious girl smiled brightly at everyone and introduced herself. "I am Azeline Aliner Duplain. I would like to invite you, Derek, to be the magic tutor for my younger sister, Diella, the eldest daughter of House Duplain, Azelina Leaner Duplain. Derek glanced at her with some concern. A magic tutor for the young lady. A grand palace bustled with servants coming and going, Duplain Manor. The chamber door suddenly swung open from the outside. A towering figure strode in angrily, saying as he moved, "Father, Brother Valerian, please look at this." Duplain, who was approving documents, looked up and frowned at his son. "Raig, what are you doing? Conduct yourself in keeping with your status." Raig stood beside a maid who was sobbing pitifully and loudly accused. "The one who needs to behave properly isn't you, but Diella. Time and again she lays hands on my maid." The maid's face was soaked with tears. Valerian irritably turned his head to his brother. "Lower your voice, father and I are speaking." Raig, still angry, continued to accuse. "Last month more than 10 servants quit. Every few days she smashes things." He stepped up to Duplain and angrily slammed his hand on the table. "When will you finally punish that unruly child?" Valerian, furious at his brother's attitude, sprang to his feet and shouted, "Raig." He frowned, his tone oppressive. "Enough, stop and go outside." Raig said nothing, only scowled as he turned to glare at his brother. The silhouettes of two girls suddenly appeared. "Father, even if Diella is headstrong, we still have Azeline, don't we?" Raig scowled, furrowing his brow as he voiced his opinion. "I think we should let Diella go." Duplain removed his glasses and said calmly, "It's not your concern." Raig angrily said, "I've had the steward investigate several convents, good facilities and frequented by nobles. Better she serve the church than live as an eyesore to others, right? If this continues, it'll only bring disaster." Duplain's face darkened at that, and he grabbed his son's head. Then he forcefully pressed his head down onto the table. Duplain's voice carried an indescribable fury, his gaze cold as a blade. "I said it's none of your business." Raig gritted his teeth, refusing to yield despite the blow. "It's time for you to be decisive, father." Duplain looked at him with a few traces of displeasure. Azeline cheerfully led the way for Derek. Then suddenly she turned and asked him, "You've heard of my sister Diella, right?" Derek tried to search his memory and answered, "Diella? I have seen the name in the Duplain family records." Hearing that, Azeline bowed her head, sad and helpless. "Yes, that's right. Perhaps few people know of her in the outside world." The chamber door opened once more. Azeline, seeing the two men before her, hurriedly spoke up. Valerian looked at her gently and said, "It's been a long time. How are you in Ebelstein?" She nodded slightly. "Yes, thanks to your care I've been living comfortably." Valerian hastily pushed the irritable Raig along while awkwardly waving and smiling at the two. "Is that so? As you can see, Raig's slightly hurt. Talk later." Azeline gently replied, "Yes, brother." Derek's gaze was icy as he looked at the two. Raig and Valerian strode off with composure. His eyes drifted to another direction. There, a maid was covering her face and sobbing pitifully. Derek fell silent at the sight. The three of them sat seriously in the study. Duplain calmly said, "Good, as long as you live well in Ebelstein." Azeline turned to him with a bright smile. "Yes, thanks to your careful arrangements. This is the magic teacher from Ebelstein. He has agreed to teach Diella." Duplain kept his eyes on the documents and answered, "Very well." Azeline and Derek stood. She smiled at Duplain and said, "Then I will take my leave." As they turned to leave, Duplain calmly commanded, "Wait, stay." Derek merely turned to look at him calmly. Sunlight streamed into the dim room through the crack in the door. The documents continued being written without pause. Duplain glanced up from reviewing the papers and asked Derek, "You look young, 16 years old." He looked at him and answered politely, "Yes." He asked further, "How far can you use magic?" Derek answered honestly, "I can use some first-level magic." Duplain reached up and removed his glasses. He looked straight at Derek and said seriously, "Don't be overly modest. Humility isn't always a virtue." He said nothing, only silently watched Duplain. In Derek's eyes, the entire Duke Duplain now exuded a terrifying aura. Duke Duplain's politeness was useless before a fifth-rank mage. Derek bowed his head and said to him, "If I was rude, I apologize." Duplain replied, "It's all right. I understand why you hid your skills. Excessive talent can sometimes consume its owner." He pushed up his glasses as if taking in his age and clothing. "You're not at all like a magic tutor." Derek nodded solemnly, "I am a mercenary." Duplain looked at him and said, "Since Azeline chose you, I have no objection. I permit you access to Diella's subsidiary villa." He stood and added, "A maid will show you the way. I'm leaving now." Derek hurriedly spoke up, "May I ask one thing?" Duplain calmly agreed, "Speak." When Duplain agreed, Derek continued, "Sir, I'm a mercenary. If I accept a task, I finish it. Azaline hired me. He looked at the Duke and added, to teach Diella magic and help her integrate into noble society. Duplain frowned displeasedly. Why state the obvious? Derek looked straight into his eyes. So I'd like to ask your permission for something. Duplain looked at him, full of curiosity. A plate sliced through the air and flew toward them. It struck the wall and shattered with a bang, causing the maid beside it to scream in fright. She hurriedly bent over, frantically apologizing. I'm sorry, my lady. The woman opposite sneered. Sorry, do you think apologies from the likes of you mean anything? Then she suddenly ordered, get out of my sight at once. If you dare show up again, I'll throw it straight at that cowardly face. A steaming cup of hot tea appeared, but why was it for Derek? Jaden, sitting opposite Azaline, asked in puzzlement. The Duplain household should have dozens of magic tutors. Besides, it's not easy for a commoner to teach magic to nobles. She lowered her head and answered him. Nearly all the famous mages on the continent were invited, and each one gave up. I was desperate enough to accept anyone who could use magic. Then Azaline looked up at Jaden and said, Derek is originally a mercenary, but he understands noble culture. Jaden, hearing that, replied, maybe his master was once a noble and taught him all sorts of things. Azaline, as if suddenly enlightened, said, I see, compared to ordinary mercenaries, he has presence. I think Derek can discipline Diella. Jaden suddenly said, Miss Azaline, you need to learn to judge people better. Azaline, surprised, asked what. He looked at her seriously and said, Derek is a street mage who has been a mercenary since childhood. Do you think such people survive on presence and kindness alone? Azaline was somewhat shocked but said nothing. Derek was led by a maid. Alone, he stood before the large door of the room. Derek's hand suddenly rose into the air. He raised his hand and lightly knocked on the door. Derek looked at the door before him and said nothing. He reached out and turned the doorknob. Opening the door, Derek calmly said hello. Looking at the lonely figure of the young lady inside, he said carefully, I'm Derek, may I come in? The young lady merely commanded in a soft voice, come here, Diella Catherine Duplain of the Duplain family. Derek slowly stepped closer to the young lady. The corner of her mouth suddenly twitched upward. A cup of water was hurled and hit him squarely in the face. Derek's face was now drenched with tea. Diella stood arrogantly and taunted, oh my, what a mess, did a sewer rat crawl into the house? She stepped toward him with delight, her tone full of mockery. Isn't this the mercenary the steward spoke of? Or look closely, is it really a rat? One of her hands rested on a chair. One of her feet followed and planted on it. Diella grabbed a bucket of dirty water, stood on the chair and poured it over Derek's head. So, smelling the sewer water, do you miss home? That foul-smelling outfit suits you well. Standing on the chair, Diella said with mock regret, that's all the water, what a pity. Derek said nothing, he simply looked up and coldly glanced at her. Diella frowned in annoyance at that. In anger, she kicked him hard in the chest. How dare you look at me like that? Derek was kicked and fell into a seated position. Diella stood arrogantly with her hands on her hips, watching him struggle. She suddenly raised her hand as if to take off her shoe, damn it. Diella lifted the shoe and pinched her nose in disgust at the filthy stench. Then she flung the shoe forcefully at Derek. Diella sat down lightly in the adjacent chair. She looked down at him arrogantly and said, you sewer rat, know your place. You dare teach me? Didn't the streets teach you basic manners? At a desk in the study, Duplain quietly gazed at the scene outside the window. His expression was filled with deep thought. He recalled the earlier conversation when Derek had said, I'm here, which means Miss Diella's problem is not easy to resolve, so I want to ask you, who truly loves Diella? He coldly glanced at the Duke and asked, Sir, may I be allowed to use whatever measures necessary to teach the young lady? The Duke pondered the question and did not answer. A sudden, sharp slap landed across Diella's face, reddening it and leaving her stunned. Derek rotated his wrist, while Diella remained dazed from the slap. She looked up in terror at the imposing figure before her. Then she stared, touching the slapped side of her cheek without saying a word. Derek's gaze on Diella was full of killing intent. Wake up. 3 years earlier, Derek and Keisha were sitting leisurely in a carriage. Derek was wiping his sword and asked, Sir, if you had to teach an ungrateful, insolent disciple, what would you do? Keisha propped her chin and said, I suppose I would empathize, be tolerant, and accept them. He was slightly displeased and said, isn't that a bit idealistic? What if even that doesn't work with the disciple? Keisha explained, the essence of education is to lead a disciple toward a better path. Derek, if you cannot communicate through understanding and tolerance, you must find a starting point. Derek asked, what is that starting point? Keisha frowned and glanced at him, imprint fear into them. Diella, stunned, covered her face in bewilderment. Derek crossed his arms and said to her, treat others with care and respect. I won't say it a second time, wake up. Diella pushed herself up with her hands. She slapped him hard across the face. Diella scowled at him, how dare you, how dare you. Another brutal slap landed on her face. Derek glanced at Diella with a dark expression. I won't say it a second time. When you deal with others, show care and respect. Diella's expression gradually turned frantic. She sprang to her feet and shouted loudly, Steward, what are you doing? This bastard just struck our Miss Diella. Delon, hearing Diella's cry, rushed in with the servants in a panic. Miss Diella, are you all right? He marched up to Derek and reprimanded him loudly. What are you doing? How dare you lay a hand on the young lady if the Grand Duke finds out? Derek said nothing. He pulled a rolled document from his coat. Holding the letter aloft, Derek said coldly, Grand Duke Duplain has entrusted me with full authority over Miss Diella's education. Whatever methods I use, remember this is what he permitted. Delon took the paper and put his glasses on to read it. Diella watched him read with tension. Night had completely shrouded the sky above the castle. Raig gripped Valerian's arm and urged urgently, Calm down, brother, calm down. Valerian angrily shoved open the door and shouted, Are you the mercenary? Derek only lifted his eyes and looked at him coldly. Valerian, furious, grabbed the collar to strike Derek. How dare you hit Diella? Raig hurriedly stopped him. Put that down and talk. Derek looked back coldly. This was authorized by His Highness. Raig hurriedly stepped between them. Hey, this guest was invited by Azaline. If you do this, she'll be embarrassed. Her father already agreed. He turned away in anger and walked off. Follow me, Raig. Don't block the way. Mind your own business. Raig laughed conciliatorily and slapped Derek on the shoulder. I've heard about it. Diella needs a beating to wake up. Don't worry, he won't go too far. Derek turned his head to look at Raig. Watching their backs leave the room, he muttered, Why keep clinging to that useless child? The door ajar revealed and lit part of the doll's face. Valerian opened the room and said to him, Come in. As he led the way, he explained, This was Diella's room in the main manor. Now it's been left like this. Derek's gaze landed on a painting in the room. Valerian's eyes softened as he looked at the painting. Diella loved painting. Whenever she showed her work, she blushed and looked so cute. Looking at the painting, he added, but she rarely finished anything. She'd paint the part she liked and then abandon it halfway. Valerian suddenly said, Sorry, I got too emotional earlier. Sorry about that. Derek turned to him and replied, It's fine, don't worry about it. Standing in a room full of paintings, he asked, Why bring me to this room? Valerian answered sadly, I wanted you to see that Diella wasn't always someone to be abandoned or beaten. Yet at some point she became overly obsessed with noble blood. Derek listened silently as he spoke, then was eventually driven out of the main manor and confined to the secondary villa. I can't understand what turned her into this. He reached up and took a book from the shelf. I must prevent Diella from entering the convent at all costs. If the girl learns even a single one-star spell, I can persuade my father. Valerian suddenly gripped Derek by the shoulders. Please save Diella. He shoved Valerian's hands away and said, Wait. Derek flipped through a few pages, so she hasn't completely given up magic. Look at the dense notes in this book. He turned to Valerian and asked, Those other volumes are probably just theory and rules, right? Valerian answered, Yes, nobles usually study rules. Derek fell into pensive thought. A beautiful landscape painting hung on the wall. Derek snapped the book shut. He handed the book to Valerian and said, I'll give it a try. The gorgeous night sky appeared through the window. Diella was sleeping soundly on the soft bed. A bucket of water suddenly poured down. Diella was drenched and screamed in panic. Derek looked at her coldly and said, Sleepy now. Diella ground her teeth and sat up. Are you insane? He didn't answer. He simply grabbed her and pulled her along. Come with me. There's somewhere you need to go. Diella yelled in fury, Hey, let go. How dare you touch me? Are you mad? Derek dragged her down the corridor as she screamed wildly, It's painful. Let go. I'm not going anywhere. What are you doing? Stop that bastard. The cool moonlight shone below. Derek said nothing as he hauled Diella out of the palace. Then he coldly shoved her to the ground. Diella ground her teeth and cursed, What will this change? Wake up, you lowborn. How dare you teach me? Derek suddenly spoke, startling her. Won't listen. Then let me tell you an interesting story. He gave a twisted smile and said, The truth is I have no intention of teaching Diella any magic. I just enjoy beating arrogant nobles. Diella went pale and stammered, What? Derek shrugged as if it were obvious. Isn't it reasonable? Why should a lowborn like me revere nobility? Tutoring and morality are just pretty excuses. Diella trembled. What are you saying? He faced her with a grin. I just need an excuse to punch the proud faces of nobles like you. Derek drew his sword and said, Do you know how glorious the screams of those aristocrats sound? Diella trembled and threatened, You think it will be over after this? He raised the sword and laughed maliciously. Of course, you're about to be confined to a convent. Who would believe someone like you? Diella's face grew paler by the moment. If something serious happens, I'll just offer my life in atonement. What is a lowborn life worth anyway? The blade in Derek's hand reflected Diela's terrified face. Or if I flee, no one will remember me. Consider it removing a thorn for the Duplain family. If that man catches me, I'm dead for sure. He stood watching her figure fade into the distance. Running across the meadow toward the manor would get her caught immediately. Her face was torn, but she dared not stop. I must slip into the woods. I know the paths there. If I escape, I can reach the manor. Diela leapt over a root. Then he'll be the one doomed, not me. Diela froze as she glanced back. A massive ball of fire appeared. Derek raised his hand to control the fireball. Diela turned and clenched her teeth, thinking a fireball. Staring at the huge fireball in Derek's hand, she was stunned. It's a second rank spell. How can he use rank 2? Derek smirked slightly. Another fireball tore through the air toward them. Diela was so terrified she could only stand frozen. She bent down quickly to dodge. Where the fireball landed, a huge explosion erupted. Diela gaped in terror, sweat pouring down her face. Derek curled his lips in a rueful smile. Missed. The full moon cast a pale golden veil over the silent night. The sound of a woman's running feet tore through the stillness. Diela panicked and ran as if something was chasing her. Paying too much attention to what was behind her, she unfortunately tripped over a dry branch. Diela clutched the cold ground. Luckily, her face was uninjured. She stifled the pain and forced herself to stand. Suddenly, a volley of arrows flew toward her. Diela caught sight of the sharp arrows at a glance. She nimbly stepped back just as the arrows embedded in the ground. Fortunately, they missed her. Diela hesitated and collapsed, watching everything unfolding before her. Derek approached and praised, "You move quite well. It's hard to believe someone who spends her days stuck in the secondary villa can do this." She grit her teeth, eyes full of rage as she looked up at him. Immediately before he could react, Diela bolted forward. Derek pressed his lips together at her cold attitude. She wasn't doing much better here. Her strength was beginning to wane, but she kept telling herself, how long must she keep fleeing? Could she escape? If she continued like this, she would surely be caught. Not far into the run, Diela was drawn back by something behind her. It was him stooping to cast a spell, and a deep puddle had formed on the ground. Derek looked up, and everything returned to its original state. A surge rose within him. Right, this is the forest from the painting. It's where she must have played as a child. Derek recalled seeing this image in a painting and guessed that in nature's embrace she had unconsciously sensed a current of magic and transformed it into her strokes. Lost in thought, a sound from behind suddenly shattered it. This must be. Before he knew it, Diela had returned, holding a heavy rock aimed at his head. Derek didn't hold back either. He drew the sword at his hip. He deftly knocked the rock aside, causing her to fall. Diela gritted her teeth as her attempt was exposed. He looked at her coldly, red glints flashing in his eyes. "I admire your spirit. You realized it's hard to escape pursuit, so you returned to attack. That was not an easy decision." Diela wanted to get up and run, but couldn't. Something seemed to be pulling her back. Derek sneered as a reminder, "You don't have the strength to run anymore." He raised his sword. "I'll grant you a mercy, Diela. Any last words?" She seemed to accept the truth and let out a laugh. He showed a trace of sadness and asked, "Why are you so obsessed with noble blood?" At that question, her heart tightened. Diela's face held a sourness for herself. "What else do I have besides it? Without this noble blood, I'm completely empty." She clenched her fist and slammed it down on the cold ground in hatred. Magic, magic, magic. When she looked up at him, Diela's eyes were full of tears. "Do you think I haven't tried? I tried until death and still failed. What am I supposed to do?" Derek was momentarily silenced. She dropped to her knees, venting her fury into the cold earth. "If magic and painting are both rejected, if I become a failure." Diela's eyes narrowed with hatred. "Then what do I have besides this blood? If I lose that too, I will." Her words rang out like an accusation. "What will I become?" Derek pressed his lips together, unable to answer her. The sword in his hand gleamed once more. Diela didn't pay attention. Her eyes were now only tears. In the brilliant moonlight, Derek raised the sword and nodded. "I've heard clearly." With tear-filled eyes, he spoke his farewell goodbye to her. In the blink of an eye, hazy patches of light appeared, sweeping Derek's figure away into the distance. Diela fearfully bowed her head and shut her eyes tight. She bit her lip as if accepting her fate and slowly opened her eyes to look at the world. Among sharp blocks of ice, a sword had impaled one and stood proudly revealed. Diela stared around in confusion, as if nothing had quite registered. It was him. He was still there, forming a circle around where she sat. Diela looked at the hand, emitting a faint halo, trembling. Magic. Seeing everything secure, he sheathed the sword at his side. Derek bowed earnestly. "You've suffered enough, miss. Please forgive my rudeness." Diela stopped crying and raised hopeful eyes to him. Seeing that expression, Derek explained, "Though this is only a display of mana, not truly magic, you did very well." Diela was once again infuriated by him. The long-suppressed pressure finally found release, and she burst into loud sobs. A big one and a small one. One cry made the dark night tumultuous. The moon remained hidden behind clouds, silently witnessing it all. Derek helped her sit on a tree trunk and explained, This is the wild discipline, Diella asked. The wild discipline. As he bandaged her leg, he answered her question. Yes, most nobles follow the disciplined school. All schools are similar in essence, but their training processes differ vastly. She listened seriously as he explained. Miss Diella belongs to the wild school but was forced to study the disciplined school's theory, which caused the problem. Not that the clothes don't fit, but that you're trying to cram yourself into a suit that's far too tight. Hearing that sounded convincing, Diella doubted. How do you know? How did you recognize I'm of the wild school? I've seen your paintings, miss. You sense the mana drifting in nature and sketch it onto canvas. He kept his head down, focused on his task and not on her gaze. Natural-born mages of the wild school usually, from childhood, feel mana in the environment. Diella's mood softened somewhat. She was no longer tearful. Once satisfied, Derek brushed off his clothes to help her up. All right, you can walk now. Diella felt more at ease. Not bad, about this level is fine. Derek stepped forward a few paces. Though you've emitted mana, there's still a long way to go. Tomorrow I'll teach you how to use it naturally. Just as he was about to leave, she finally dared to speak. Derek was too embarrassed, so Diella turned her face away casually and said, "Thank you." He neither refused nor replied further. At last he called to her. "Let's go." Diella cheerfully approached. "Let's go." The two chatted under the moon, one asking, one answering in harmony. "By the way, did you paint that sunset?" "I don't remember. I haven't held a brush in ages." "It's a perfect work, my masterpiece. You're the first to recognize its value." The next day, bright sunlight streamed through the window. Diella stared in confusion at the mana appearing on her hands. Those streams of light were faintly wondrous. Her eyes filled with concentration, giving it her full attention. Suddenly what appeared were swirls of gray-black smoke, making Diella anxious. This isn't good. Outside, maids were passing by her door. Suddenly, Diella flung the door open, startling the maid. The basin of water in her hands rocked. Water splashed everywhere from the motion, soaking her dress. The maid flustered, "I'm sorry, Miss Diella. Sorry, I'm so sorry." Diella shot her a killing glance. The maid quickly knelt and bowed, begging forgiveness. "I deserve to die. Please spare me this once." Instead, Diella calmly advised, "Be careful." That left the maid bewildered. Why didn't she hit me? She just said that and left. The other servants gathered to help and muttered, "Are you okay? Were you hit?" The miss just said that. "Yes, she went out last night." "What happened, I wonder?" Inside the room, Derek was still fast asleep. Diella pounded on the door frantically, calling him awake. "Derek, Derek." Derek rubbed his eyes and opened the door groggily. "What's the matter?" The steward had come to calm her. "Miss, you should keep decorum. This isn't proper." Diella paid him no mind and said to Derek, "Teach me how to control the mana that just awakened. I tried on my own and couldn't." The steward, hearing this, panicked. She awakened mana. Seeing Derek not answer, she urged him, "You promised to teach me today. Hurry up." He suddenly slammed the door and left only one sentence. "Please come back this afternoon, okay?" Diella only smiled faintly without anger, bringing the steward to tears of relief. At last the miss has. Sure enough, her temper wouldn't relent. Seconds later, she was pounding on the door repeatedly. "Hey, who do you think you are ordering me around? Open the door. I told you to get up right now." The knocking continued outside, but he calmly ignored it and went back to sleep. "Hey, open the door," Diella shouted angrily, "you lunatic." Cut to the palace the next morning. Raig walked slowly down the corridor. Two maidservants sweeping nearby glanced at each other and whispered, "Have you heard? Miss Diella hasn't broken a single plate in days." The other maid nodded. "It's true, this morning I spilled water and didn't get scolded." The blonde maid covered her mouth and murmured, "No, I heard Miss Diella awaken mana." The other gasped, "Oh my, really?" At that moment, Raig passed by and halted. Raig turned his head and shot them a cold glance. "What were you just saying?" Cut to the study, the scratch of a pen echoed. Duplain hesitated and said, "Diella awakened mana." Valerian looked at him and replied, "Yes, father, I've confirmed it with the steward and the servants several times." He showed little expression, merely murmuring, "That's fortunate." Raig now looked at him with a more serious face. "Don't be quick to rejoice just because she awakened mana, father." At that tone, Valerian couldn't help shouting, "Hey, your sister awakened mana and you don't even praise her." Duplain frowned slightly. Raig paid him no mind and continued to his father, "Do you remember all the mischief she's caused? Are we to ignore that and not send her to the convent just for this small achievement?" He lowered his eyes, looking thoughtful, and said nothing. Cutscene: the weather today looked very nice. Diella sat on the bed, puffing out her cheeks. Derek put his hands on his hips and looked at her. "Are you joking?" Diella turned her back to him, sulking. "I'm not joking, I'm angry." Derek awkwardly rubbed her head. "No matter how angry you are, it's useless." Diella immediately retorted, "It's not anger, it's fury." He lowered his eyes to counsel her. "Sulking won't solve anything. Everything has its proper order." Finally, she couldn't help it and raised a clenched fist sharply. "It's not sulking, I'm angry." Derek froze. He pressed his lips together in thought. Diella couldn't hold back and turned to leave first, hesitating. Fine, let's say it's sulking then. Derek stepped forward and pulled out a chair. He sat down and glanced at Diella impassively. Awakening mana doesn't mean you can be reckless, otherwise you'll burn out immediately. I'm speaking from experience. Studies are important, but so is rest. You've rested enough, now it's time to learn. She sneered sarcastically. Yes, yes, teacher's always right. Here comes the ancient magic professor. Yes, yes. Derek's expression suddenly darkened. He looked at her and said coldly, so do you want me to teach in a non-archaic way or not? Unpleasant images of him surfaced in Diella's memory. Derek began the lesson looking at her hands. Today we'll practice mana control. Once you master this ability, miss, you can quickly become proficient in one-star magic. The wild school isn't bound by the system and suits self-study well. It values freedom far more than the disciplined school. Honestly, miss, you're very suited to the wild school. Hearing his praise, Diella stammered, what did you say? Derek looked at her and said seriously, as I said, your free-spirited nature suits the wild school perfectly. Moreover, with noble blood, you have abundant talent. One of her ears perked up, catching every word clearly. Diella blushed slightly and hesitated. Me talented. He dropped his gaze and replied, yes, awakening mana created that ice wall, clearly innate talent. She fiddled with her fingers and asked casually, so am I a prodigy? Derek immediately objected. Talent and prodigy are two different things. Diella pouted. They're pretty similar. He said again, no, completely different. Diella stopped arguing and sighed. Oh fine, you're right, you win. Raig was standing outside the room at that moment, having overheard the entire conversation. He grit his teeth and snorted coldly. Time passed slowly through the palace. Diella burst into the room, excitedly calling out, Derek, I awakened mana but can't control it. A few days later, she ran up to him boasting, Derek, look, I can use frost now, but it feels so strange. Time continued to pass. Diella chased him down the corridor shouting, Derek, I can sense mana, but this is really confusing. One afternoon again beneath a tree, Derek, what are you doing here? Diella put her hands on her hips and demanded, you should be near the annex. Derek replied indifferently, did you think I lent you the magic book so you'd actually study? Well, yes, that's for studying. Diella said no more. She grabbed his wrist and pulled him off. Hey, what now? Like last time you said, I've succeeded in releasing mana. Quick, check it for me. Inside Valerian's study, the door swung open. Derek stepped in. You summoned me. Valerian nodded and gestured. You're here, sit down and speak. He didn't beat around the bush and asked directly, how has Diella been lately? Derek lowered his eyes and answered calmly, there's been significant progress, but she'll need more time to master one-star magic. Valerian nodded, I understand. Perhaps Mother will return after next week's social gathering. Just so you know, she's not easy. Everyone in the manor is fine for now, but nobles generally dislike commoners holding important positions. You understand? Derek looked Valerian in the eye and said, I will remember. Did you summon me just to say that? He suddenly pressed his lips together and fell silent. Valerian stood and walked to the window, speaking slowly. I am the heir of House Duplain. Being head of the family means tolerating and protecting every member. To do that, one must treat everyone sincerely. But it's so difficult. Human hearts are deep and complicated. I wish everyone shared the same thoughts and values, but reality isn't like that. Derek looked at his back and asked bluntly, so what do you want to say? He tightened his grip on Valerian's hand. As he turned, tears welled up. Diella won't play with me anymore, Derek. He heard this and darkened, glancing at Valerian. He began to complain. When she was little, she always played with me. The image is still imprinted on my heart. Is there any more angelic child in this world? So Derek, do you have any idea how to win Diella's favor back? Derek slowly took a sip of tea and said, why are you asking me this? Without hesitation, Valerian replied, Diella only hangs around you anyway. No sooner had he finished than Diella's voice rang out, Derek, where are you? Valerian suddenly produced something and held it out to Derek. It's nothing, look at this. I've learned to make dolls from the maids. In his hand was an absolutely ugly doll. Valerian proudly boasted, see, it looks just like Diella. Can you feel this brotherly love? Derek glared at him and said bluntly, do you intend to curse her? Valerian pressed his lips together, tears welling again. Derek, you really don't understand these things. Time passed, and on a fine day at the palace, the woman arrived. She looked at Derek and spoke, I've heard much about you. They say you found an extraordinarily talented magic tutor. Pleased to meet you, I am Miriella Dable Duplain. If it's not a bother, I'd like to send a small gift to your domain. He replied without the slightest embarrassment, I'm not part of any nobility. She was slightly taken aback. He continued, I'm a commoner. Miriella widened her eyes in surprise, a commoner. Time rewinds to a week earlier. Azeline bowed her head to Derek and said, I'm glad I brought you to the manor. She smiled with narrowed eyes, I'm her sister. I want to stay with Diella, but I have many matters to handle in Ebelstein, so I'll leave her in your care. Derek didn't look up as he answered, yes, I understand. Jaden patted his shoulder from behind. Derek, Our Lady entrusts her to you, and you reply so curtly. The two boarded the carriage, looking toward him. Jaden smiled and reminded him, finish quickly and come back. Belden will throw a fit if he finds out. Azeline also gave a small smile. It's up to you, Derek. The carriage slowly rolled away. Azeline suddenly remembered something and covered her mouth in alarm. Oh my, I almost forgot. Jaden quickly answered her, yes, milady. What did you mean to say? She looked back through the window. My mother returns next week. I forgot to mention it to Derek. He looked at her with puzzlement. Is that something to mention? Azeline hesitated. Well, she thought, my mother is a bit. Scene shifts to the front of a room. The door is thrown wide open. A woman in a blue dress stepped in. Azeline thought to herself, it's hard to describe, like a goddess of destruction. Miriella slammed her hand down forcefully on Duplain's office table in anger. A commoner as a tutor? What is this? Faced with her fury, Duplain replied calmly, I heard that clearly. Could you lower your voice? Miriella fumed. Now's not the time for that. It's Diella, our beloved youngest daughter. As she erupted, he slowly removed his glasses and said, Miriella, you know I don't much like hearing commoners. Duplain explained helplessly, but the renowned magic teachers were all at a loss. Miriella planted her hands on the table and ground her teeth in anger. Regardless, how could you bring in a mercenary like that? He added, finding a good magic tutor isn't easy. And besides, Derek was recommended by Azeline. Miriella covered her forehead with her hand and turned away. No, sir, there should at least be minimum standards. She turned to Duplain with a suggestion. That's right, you could have my brother Flam come. He was busy before, but times are different now. Diella has awakened to magic. Flam can teach her. His face showed no expression as he answered her. Hire a garrison commander as a tutor. Are we going to run the domain haphazardly? Taken aback, Miriella yelled in anger. What about the Ebelstein nobility? Do they run things haphazardly too? This is a battlefield. She pointed angrily. Among the nobility, a tutor is the most important calling card. Yet you hire an unknown commoner. Do you want Diella to be a laughingstock when she enters noble society? The door was pushed open by someone. Valerian stepped in to intervene. Mother, calm down. You're not here to argue with father, are you? Miriella turned her head and spoke softly to him. Step back, Valerian. This matter cannot be taken lightly. A voice cut in. After all, does that commoner even have the right to teach Diella? That's the real question, mother. Hearing the voice, both Miriella and Valerian turned to look. When they saw who it was, she smiled and called Ray. He had his hands clasped behind his back, his face grave. A commoner daring to be a magic tutor for nobles isn't normal, but if he truly has the ability, then there's nothing to fear. Raig proposed to Duplain, Father, why don't I test Derek? If I defeat him in a duel of magic then. He commented, he's said to be a genuine mage. He said nothing, only glancing fixedly at him. Then Raig asked further, what about testing Diella? Hearing that, Valerian looked at him full of curiosity. Raig added, if Derek is a good tutor, Diella will also learn a great deal. I'll test his abilities. After hearing his son's words, Duplain fell silent and said nothing more. After Raig left, Valerian hurried after him. Raig, when he stopped, Valerian angrily demanded, what are you thinking? A magic duel. Raig softly reminded him, brother, do you really believe Diella has changed? Have you forgotten what she did? Valerian explained, after all, she's our sister. A blood relative should be protected. Hearing him, Raig gritted his teeth. A blood relative. Suddenly he shouted in fury that blood will drag the whole family into the abyss. Haven't her actions been enough? If she enters noble society, everything will be over. Valerian frowned. Is that truly what you think, Raig? He turned and walked away. The one who crossed the line before has always been Diella. She only deserves to be locked in the auxiliary villa. He watched Raig's retreating back and fell into thought. Raig left Valerian behind with a determined look and a sense of helplessness. Outside, a little bird perched on a branch chirped merrily beside the window frame. Diella pushed the door open from outside and called Derek. He was sitting casually on the bed reading. Seeing her like that, he asked, what's happening so early in the morning? She tossed a rolled-up piece of paper onto the open book. Derek unfolded the paper. She crossed her arms and said, if I lose this magic duel, you'll be fired. His eyes went to the paper as he replied, yes, I know Raig is already a fully trained one-star mage, so it will probably be difficult. Diella shouted in anger, is that all you can do? You'll be fired. Derek rolled the paper back up in his hand. I'm a mercenary. I only take work, complete it, and collect my pay. He added calmly, I've already been paid for that fee. Hearing that, Diella was taken aback. Are you really serious? 1 week later, a mixed crowd was filing in. Duplain and Muriella slowly entered the audience chamber. Seeing them, Derek bowed in greeting, you've arrived. Then he slowly looked up. Seeing that expression, Duplain thought to himself, he shows no sign of nervousness. He's very confident. He took his seat, thinking inwardly, remaining calm in this situation. Perhaps I judged him too hastily. From afar, footsteps entered. From his attire, one could tell it was Raig. He entered with a brooding aura, fists clenched, thinking, this is not a simple magic duel. Today I'll crush Derek. Raig slowly mounted the dais. Diella, I'll make you regret it to your bones. On the other side, Diella in a red dress was also approaching the dais. She lifted her head and looked forward with an expressionless gaze. Back to the conversation between Diella and Derek. Do you really want that? Are the other things unimportant? He said as he moved, she can feel it too. Her mana has begun to align. She can't use 1-star magic yet, but it won't be long. Derek put on his cloak. After all, she carries Duplain blood. Why say such things all of a sudden? He glanced at Diella behind him. I told you. Studying in the wild school means focusing on self-learning rather than inheriting from others. She tearful snapped at him, and so, why are you saying this now? Seeing her like that, he fell silent. Diella's face turned somber. Derek, I know I'm not a good student. She bit her lip to hold back tears, but I want to continue learning magic from you. I don't want others to teach me. Derek was silent for a moment. He slowly put on his gloves. I'll say this first. I don't know the rules or rituals of noble duels, and I've never tried them. He glanced at Diella standing behind him, but I can teach you how to win. Do you want to win? Diella was born to mockery and teasing. Their mouths smiled while their words cut. Looks like Miss Diella has no mana. Even famous tutors give up. Oh my, how could the Duplain house have someone like that? The Duplains are past their prime, always causing trouble. The elder siblings are capable, but why is the youngest like this? The Grand Duke must be distressed. Thankfully, there's Azeline. Children are a burden, better not born at all. Remembering those words, her eyes filled with determination. Please help me win. And finally, Diella did not come here as Raig's sister nor as the Duplain youngest child. Derek's gaze followed every step as Diella advanced onto the dais. Now she stood on this arena as Derek's student. At the training arena, when the two had taken their positions, the steward cleared his throat. The high-level mage dual code of Ebelstein Hall Kelbrum will be applied. Whoever activates General Pelham's protective circle first will be declared the loser. Then the match begins. Derek thought General Pelham's protective circle triggers when the user suffers heavy damage, and it simultaneously nullifies the opponent's magic. I wonder how nobles fight using such an expensive item. Is surprising. They must be very wealthy. The duration is 10 minutes. It seems Raig wants to finish the match before time runs out. Raig decided to go all out and strike Diella down immediately. He mouthed the incantation and began channeling magic. Diella remained calm, standing before the mana orb Raig had formed. Raig thought, sorry, but you'll have to return to the auxiliary residence. Raig launched a windblade magical strike at Diella. The girl calmly waited for the attack to approach, then dodged lightly. Raig grew resentful seeing her evade so smoothly. How dare she? Raig continued hurling a barrage of spells at Diella. Derek sat below, observing and thinking. He used single-star magic very skillfully, but he seemed completely inexperienced in real combat. Forcing changes in a spell's trajectory must have consumed a lot of mana. Raig's windsword attack was easily blocked by Diella's ice wall. He thought to himself, that's not even high-level magic, just pure mana materialization. Does she intend to use those little tricks to stop my magic? Raig created even more mana spheres. I'll just crush those petty tricks. Try blocking this one, Diella. Recalling Derek's instructions, a mercenary's combat technique isn't like a noble's. We don't regard fairness as a virtue, we focus solely on winning. It's far from the ceremonious rules of noble duels, so if we win, you may face much gossip. However, we can manufacture a result where you are the victor. Are you truly okay with that? Diella's face filled with determination as she said loudly, of course. Back in the fight, Diella actively dodged Raig's attacks. Among mercenaries, there are always those who win despite power disparities. Most of those people don't engage in measured duels, but in warfare. War here involves controlling the battlefield and exploiting terrain. In other words, using every tactic and method necessary to secure victory. Even the opponent's negligence can be exploited. Facing a direct strike, Diella gritted her teeth and raised an ice wall to brace herself. Raig thought inwardly, it's over. Diella felt a chill run down her spine. Turning around, she saw Raig's attack had been redirected. now aimed straight at her back. With a crash, smoke and dust exploded everywhere. Derek's face remained unnervingly calm. Muriela, worried, shouted, Diella. The steward cried, what are you doing? Stop the match at once, Diella will be hurt. The Duke Duplain sitting nearby spoke up, have her sit down, the match isn't over yet. Muriela asked, what did you just say? The Duke Duplain reassured her, she wasn't hit. The General Pelham's circle hasn't activated. The Duke glanced at Derek, thinking to himself, that man didn't even blink, did he anticipate this? In the drifting smoke, Raig thought, she was clearly struck by the wind blade. Yet the protective circle didn't trigger, where did it go? Diella knew she couldn't beat her brother by honorable means. She resorted to guerrilla tactics, sneaking under the wooden floor of the arena to strike. From beneath the ground, a pillar of ice shot straight up. Raig was startled but luckily dodged in time. Raig gritted his teeth, thinking attacking from under the floor. According to the rules of Kelbrim Hall, leaving the arena results in a loss. Seeing the steward shake his head, Raig gave a bitter laugh. Ah, so the space beneath the floor doesn't count as leaving the combat area. They probably never imagined such a dirty tactic would be used in a magic duel among nobles. While Raig was still thinking, Diella continued raising ice spikes to attack. Raig struggled to evade, thinking to himself that aiming was very difficult without a visible target. Is she just hopping to get lucky and hit me even once? There was not a trace of so-called noble decorum in this fight. Raig looked down at the hole in the floor and met Diella's eyes. That gaze, right, I've seen those before. They were unnaturally calm. It was exactly like when my brother grabbed Derek by the collar. Raig glanced at the stands. There's no way Diella came up with this on her own. This was your tactic, wasn't it, Derek? Raig pulled his cloak and posed coolly, his face serious as if in pain. Very well, then I'll play by your strategy. From above watching everything, Muriela shouted, ah, is Diella crawling under the floor? Into that dusty hole. She chided Raig, what are you doing, dear? Stop the match now. Duplain stroked his chin and said softly that the girl hadn't broken any rules. Let's observe a bit more. He peered intently downward, his mind occupied with private thoughts. Below, Diella watched and assessed. I can see the flows of mana. Above, Raig continued reciting his incantations. As he chanted, another pillar of ice erupted from beneath his feet. Raig cursed inwardly in anger. Every time I chant, she attacks from underground. I can't keep letting this happen. Then he turned his gaze to the flagpole in front of him. Beneath the ground, Diella sensed his mana flow had stopped. He was surely preparing something. What the hell is he doing? If he dares chant again, I'll attack immediately. Outside watching, Steward Delon was also astonished. No, young master. He said this because Raig had climbed up onto the flagpole. He looked down to assess. At this distance, the girl couldn't detect his mana, but jumping down now was impossible. So there was only one way left. He reached out and fired an arrow. I'll destroy that floor without chanting. Immediately, the arrow shot out and embedded itself in the flagpole he was standing on. This made Derek up above watching furrow his brow slightly. The pole snapped in two. Raig kicked the pole hard to gain momentum. The violent impact tore a large hole in the floor. Watching from above, Lady Muriela gasped his name. The recent collision sent smoke and dust billowing everywhere. Raig tried to glance forward to gather information. At that moment, Diella's blurred figure appeared in the haze. He reached out and summoned another magical arrow. The arrow now raced forward like a gust of wind. Struck by the attack, Diella's expression turned serious. She reached out to summon magic to block the strike, but her mana couldn't be summoned at that moment. This caused her some alarm. The arrow continued to speed toward her. Now she could only sidestep to avoid the attack. Afterwards, she kept moving to maintain distance. Raig looked at her, calculating that closing the gap would give him the advantage if he could fire one more magic arrow. While he was still considering this, Diella lunged forward and kicked him hard in the chest. Her eyes were full of determination. The direct kick forced Raig to brace one hand on the ground, breathing heavily. Diella then grabbed a handful of dirt and hurled it straight at him. Raig was extremely irritated but couldn't do anything. Then the girl climbed back onto the arena floor, while Raig grit his teeth and swore loudly, damn it. Kicking and throwing sand, has she run out of mana and is resorting to this? She's giving her all to win even though it's impossible. So that's it, Diella, this match is to prove your pride. Then I'll use my full strength against you, as your brother. After regaining his composure, he also climbed onto the arena floor. Diella put her hand to her head. Drops of blood began to run down her cheek. Derek's words echoed in her mind, treat it like painting with a brush. Mana is the paint and the incantation is the brush. Use the brush to gather the streaks of dispersed mana and paint a picture. And that is magic. Her eyes widened in surprise as she saw bands of magical light appear before her. Back in the present, she closed her eyes to regain her composure. Then from her body, mana began to surge, Mana is the paint, the incantation is the brush. She could feel mana swirling at her fingertips. I'll use these colors to paint a picture. That is magic. After sensing the mana, Diella was able to form a magic circle beneath her feet and conjure a magical spear. This made the steward startle and exclaim, "That's..." Even Lady Miriella was moved to tears of joy. "My dear Diella, that's single-star magic." Standing opposite, Raig thought to himself, "Ice spear, so she actually pulled it off, Diella." The girl began to manipulate the spear in her hands. On this side, Raig did not hesitate either and summoned countless magical arrows. He was certain inwardly that the outcome wouldn't change. Even if she used single-star magic, he was still one step ahead. "My attack will hit you first. The victory will be mine." Diella did not hesitate. She pointed her finger forward and directed the spear to lunge. On this side, Raig also shouted and sent the magical arrows flying forward. The two attacks collided, causing a devastating explosion that shook the surrounding space. Up in the stands watching, Miriella anxiously called her name, Diella. As soon as the smoke cleared, a magic circle had been summoned at the center of the arena. Both people inside it breathed out, utterly exhausted, and Derek, standing above watching, wore a slightly serious expression. Cut to scene 1 year earlier at the Duke's mansion. The steward walking behind spoke up, "Sir, this morning a letter from the Belmeard family arrived. It seems related to this social gathering. How would you like me to handle it, sir?" As the two of them walked, they happened to pass by Diella's room. She was inside, sitting dazed as if lost in thought. He saw this but did not speak. Back in the present, staring at the magical barrier before her, she was a little startled. The barrier activated. Across from her, Raig also recognized the problem. Standing on the observatory stands, his gaze was somewhat sorrowful. He told himself inwardly, "Have we lost?" Unable to hold back her long-suppressed emotions, Diella burst into tears like a child. Duplain watched everything but still said nothing. Seeing this, Miriella stepped forward and shouted, "Mine, mine, what on earth is this madness? To call such crude tricks and skullduggery a magic duel is utter madness. That peasant-born scoundrel dared to teach this rubbish to our Duplain lady. He recalled his youth, sir. I am Raymond Oswald Duplain, honored to have accompanied you, Duke, on the battlefield." The Duke replied, "I've heard much about you from your father. That look is exactly like your father's. No mistake. A look full of ambition." At that time he replied, "Thank you, sir." Back in the present, looking at his daughter's expression, he thought to himself, "Your gaze looks much better now, Diella." A servant hurried up from behind, calling, "Miss Diella, are you all right?" They came forward to check. "Oh my, treat her quickly. She needs immediate care." But she immediately waved them off, "No need." Then she took a few steps forward. Facing her sister, Raig responded a little, "Ah, you've worked hard, Diella." She did not answer, only bowed her head and then turned to leave. Despite the servant's efforts to stop her, "Miss, everyone please go inside." She walked straight toward Derek. He calmly looked toward her. Her expression seemed to be holding something back. When she could no longer contain it, she broke down and cried again. She clenched her fist and murmured, "I lost him, sorry." He looked at her, then stood up, reassuring her it's okay. Failure is not unusual. "I hope you can overcome this frustration and become stronger, miss." This encouragement did not soothe the girl. It only made her cry louder, "Hoo hoo hoo." The maids continued to run to her, calling Miss. Miriella, worried, also stepped forward, calling, "Oh my Diella. How did it come to this? You've worked so hard recently, my daughter." She hugged her and soothed her. "It's okay. It's all right now. First have your wounds treated, my dear." Feeling the warmth of those words, she finally relaxed and replied, "Yes." Then she and a maid went inside. After his daughter left, she regained her composure and stepped up behind Derek. Without hesitation, she scolded him, "You low-born peasant. Do you know what kind of crazy stunt you just pulled? You think teaching a bit of single-star magic makes you noble." She immediately delivered a harsh slap. She continued to rant, "You only teach dirty tricks. Don't soil the pure, beautiful lily that is my daughter. How dare you let the Duchess's ward learn such filthy, vulgar, and crude things." As she spoke, she slapped him once more. "There are things in this world that low-born people like you will never understand. Values that must be preserved and dignity that must be protected." Duplain stepped forward and turned, saying, "My dear, you saw it too, didn't you? This is no longer a magic duel. He dared to teach this rubbish to our Diella." Before she could finish, a smack rang out again, and this time Miriella herself was the one slapped. Duplain admonished, "Don't you realize who is behaving most rudely right now?" Seeing herself slapped by him, she was a little embarrassed. "Why, this man is only a commoner." He affirmed, "Yes, though he is an ordinary commoner, he is also our daughter's tutor. What parent would treat their child's teacher like that?" Saying that, he turned to him and softly said, "Please forgive her. Everyone has their own way of loving their child." He paused for a moment, then replied, "It's all right." Then he turned and said, "I have something to discuss with you privately. Follow me to the receiving room." Watching the two of them leave, Miriella was furious, grinding her teeth. Back in the receiving room, Duplain said, "You truly helped Diella grow remarkably. As the head of this household, I should grant you a fitting reward. the highest limit a commoner may reach. He proposed, would you like 3-star magic? He looked at the man, thinking to himself that he could see right through him. He saw things even the man himself hadn't noticed, understood his heart better than he did, and made an offer. Could this be the 5-star Grand Duke solution of the kingdom? If the opportunity has arrived, you must seize it quickly. He immediately answered, yes, I want it. Duplain continued, you taught Diella 1-star magic well, but among Ebelstein's elite, that achievement isn't enough to survive. Derek understood his point. Duplain has many people who can guide Miss Diella. Now that she's grasped the basics, she'll improve rapidly. The Duke Duplain added, what my daughter needs isn't a tutor, she needs a master. You harbor an ambition no commoner could dream of. You know how humiliated those arrogant nobles would feel. I'm overlooking that because it's you. Derek lowered his head, thinking the Duke doesn't speak to me much, yet he knows I'm aiming beyond 3 stars toward 4 or higher. That's what makes this man frightening. Duplain continued writing and said, however, if you persist in that intent, you can't stay here long. You're preparing to leave already, aren't you? Derek didn't deny it. Yes, that's right. Then the Duke made a very favorable bargain. It's not that I don't see your ambition, but you must teach Diella a while longer. The highest realm a commoner is permitted to touch. You crave 3-star magic, don't you? He immediately confessed, yes, I do want it. After the private talk with Duke Duplain, Derek went to the library to look for books. The piles of books before him left him utterly overwhelmed. Many spend their whole lives to obtain 2-star spellbooks, yet here were only 3-star books. This alone was reason enough for him to stay at the mansion. If Pelin found out, she'd make a scene for sure. The next day, Diella was in high spirits. Now I'm a 1-star mage. Derek, sitting there, didn't deny it. Since you cast a 1-star spell once, you can be called a 1-star mage. Seeing his indifferent attitude, Diella was angry. That's it? A student achieved something and you aren't happy? Derek bluntly replied, because it's not much of an achievement. Diella turned away in frustration and complained that he was too harsh. Then he remarked again, it seems you've recovered a lot after 3 days, haven't you? You used to be such a crybaby. Diella sat down huffily and retorted that it was just dust in her eye. She wasn't crying. Besides, my father should have told me sooner. I thought you were about to be fired. Derek refocused on the lesson. Let's begin. Since you progress quickly, you'll soon learn other 1-star spells. Hearing that made Diella beam. What did you say? What soon? Derek continued to praise her. Your development is impressive. Your mana just awakened and you've already cast a 1-star spell. Rare indeed. Diella swelled with pride. I told you I'm the kind who does what I say. So what should we practice first? Mana Arrow, which seems convenient since it needs no incantation, or the Wind Blade Raymond uses that looks powerful? Ice Spear feels great too. If I improve a bit, maybe I could even hit Raymond. Derek cut her off. We'll practice mana realization. Diella lost some enthusiasm. Why, aren't we supposed to be practicing 1-star spells? Derek explained that there are many reasons, but the foundation is the most important. A simple explanation about mana drained all the life out of Diella. Fine, do it then, you said so just do it. You're disappointing me. I thought I'd get to learn a 1-star spell. Seeing Derek staring at her, she was puzzled. Why are you staring at me like that? Is there something on my face? Derek revealed, I'm just surprised because the young lady is so obedient. Diella, offended, turned away. What kind of person do you think I am? I've respected what you said from the start. Derek reminded her from the start, Miss, you dumped dirty water on my head twice. Diella went silent, not daring to speak aloud. You still remember that? Derek said bluntly, it's hard to forget. She pretended to twirl to distract him. What a lovely day. Mana realization sounds fun. I want to try it now. Mana realization, so exciting. Seeing that she's still just a girl made Derek smile and sigh. Before long, night fell. They found Diella lying on her back on the ground, panting after a day of training. Derek approached and said it looked like the young lady would be busy soon. She struggled to sit up. You've heard too, have you? Starting next week, I'll have to study etiquette as well. Derek replied, isn't that good? You've learned a 1-star spell and now you'll be educated like true nobility. But Diella was entirely opposed. You think that's good? Noble etiquette, basics, foreign languages, geography, history, botany, piano, embroidery. I don't understand why I have to learn all that. How can Azeline endure it all? Derek explained that's why she's called Duplain's flower and is the center of Ebelstein's high society. Diella hesitated and said she only wanted to study magic. He replied lightly, then just study magic. Duke Duplain hired me, so there's plenty of time. She fell quiet, wondering if there really was much time. Derek wondered who could possibly fire me. Diella was a little embarrassed. My father accepted you, but my mother won't let it go. He was puzzled why the lady would want to dismiss him. she revealed that learning from him would make her lose noble dignity. She feared I'd become like a mercenary. Even that duel was far from the dignity nobles pursue. Derek remained calm. Then it's simple, making the lady quiet won't be hard. Remove our excuse. The next morning, Miriella was extremely worried. She couldn't imagine her child had such a terrifying teacher. My poor child. In her imagination, Derek would tie up a guard and then begin the lesson. Watch closely, Diella. This is the mercenary style. The second lesson had Diella lugging a whole wild boar into the manor to intimidate people. Is this the famed Ebelstein High Society? Scaring everyone, it's Diella Catherine Duplain. Imagining this, she held her head in frustration. What could that lowly man possibly teach Diella? Even if her husband accepted it, she was the lady of the house and had to find a way. As Miriella opened the door to the room, Diella called out, "Mother." She didn't bother to look and closed her eyes to savor the moment. "Oh, Diella, even if people say you're not mature yet, I still love it when you smile in my arms." But unlike other times, this time Diella didn't run up to hug her like a child. She was completely the part of a noble young lady. Holding 2 dresses, Diella bowed gently and said, "Did you sleep well last night, Mother?" "Because I had to recuperate, I couldn't leave my room. I'm very sorry to have missed the chance to talk with you. I have so many things I want to share with you, Mother, but unfortunately I've had piano lessons this morning." Miriella froze, then stammered, "I understand." Diella bowed politely and said, "Then I will take my leave, for I must attend my class, Mother." Miriella, still shocked, asked awkwardly, "The etiquette classes haven't started yet, right? They begin next week." Diella, just like Azeline, replied softly, "Yes, Mother, thanks to your concern, I'm really looking forward to them." Miriella had no choice but to let her go. "Hurry or you'll be late." But as Diella left, a servant accidentally dropped something in front of her. Diella asked kindly, "Are you hurt? Don't overwork yourself." The servant was as stunned as Miriella. "Yes, Miss Diella." And so Diella walked on amid the astonished gazes of everyone. Scene shifts to the Abelston noble quarter. A voice speaks. Lately Salon Rosia seems constantly filled with laughter. "Miss Azeline, I was really worried at the last gathering because you seemed burdened by concerns." Upon hearing this, Azeline was startled and replied, "Oh, I didn't mean to make you worry. Most of the things I worried about have been resolved, so I feel much better now." Opposite them, the red-haired girl was the younger daughter of the Belmeard family, Elent Elphione Belmeard. Hearing this, Elent relaxed with relief. "When I heard the rumor that you left the noble quarter to save someone, I was very worried." Azeline smiled and replied, "Thank you for your concern, Miss Elent. It really is my sister, Diella, who needs a magic tutor, and I'm a bit busy because I had to go find one myself." Elent thought to herself, "What? Azeline went to find one personally? What does that mean? How talented must that tutor be for Duplain's young lady herself to search?" Beside her, the white-haired girl added, "What did you say, your sister?" "That girl is the younger daughter of the Veltus family, Denise Linier Veltus." Azeline explained, "Yes, that's right. When I met Diella at the manor not long ago, she had become such a proper young lady I could hardly recognize her. She has even awakened single-star magic, and her manners are neat and composed, which makes me feel I must work harder." Hearing this, Denise fell a little thoughtful. How strange, Azeline is raising her sister. I thought the Duplains were hiding Diella. Then she spoke up. "It seems she found a good magic tutor." Azeline nodded in agreement. "Yes, he has no status, but he's certainly extraordinarily capable. It was worth going all the way to the Beldon Mercenary Company to find him personally." This surprised the 2 noble girls. "A mercenary?" On second thought, Elent suddenly said, "Wait, wasn't she the reason our manor's chef ran off from the Duplain household?" Recalling the chef's words that Miss Elent was truly kind, Elent sipped her tea and continued thinking. It's surprising that that tutor not only reformed that notorious thug, but also turned her into a single-star mage. The corner of her mouth twitched into an amused smile. She turned to ask Miss Azeline, "May I ask the name of that magic tutor?" Azeline, surprised by the question, replied, "Excuse me." Elent continued, "If he's tutoring Miss Diella, he'll only grow more famous. Am I right? At least I'd like to know his name in advance." Upon hearing this, Azeline cheerfully introduced, "Ah, his name is Derek." Back at the Duplain Manor, Diella was sitting and talking with her mother, recounting her recent training. Derek has also been teaching her some etiquette. Learning etiquette on one's own is really difficult. Across from her, Miriella praised, "I see, it's admirable that you've been studying on your own." Diella denied it. Not exactly on my own, it's more that Derek taught me. Her mother asked what was the hardest part of self-study. She giggled and replied, most things were very hard. I can do this because of Derek. Yet the constant appearance of his name in Diella's words made Muriella inwardly annoyed, though outwardly she remained genial. Ah, I understand. After stepping outside, her emotions finally released. That damned Derek, how many more times will that name come up, honestly? I don't know what he's done to the girl, but I won't stand for this. There must be a way to deal with it. Outside in the garden, the household staff chatted happily. Miss Diella has been very kind to the servants lately and has become gentler. The old gardener replied, lately Miss Diella seems very cheerful. She's changed a great deal in just a few weeks. The butler shared similar observations. It's truly surprising. That demeanor is one I've only seen in Miss Azeline. Perhaps she's finally striving to become a proper lady. Now we can sense a noble air from Miss Diella. Hearing Derek's name everywhere made Muriella furious. She could only grit her teeth. The scene shifted to nightfall. Outside the manor, Derek sat cultivating with the new magic tome he had received. After sensing a subtle change within his body, he reached his hand forward and began to cast a spell. Feeling a tremendous power surging through him, Derek gritted his teeth and endured the searing pain. Then the energy on his arm gradually dissipated into the air. He breathed heavily, utterly exhausted, and collapsed to the ground. Then someone stepped up from behind and caught his attention. It was Reg, who wore a friendly expression. Oh, sorry, am I interrupting your practice? Though very tired, he politely replied, not at all. What brings you here? The two of them sat down to talk. Reg turned to ask, I wanted to talk a bit about Diella. He nodded in agreement, all right. Then Reg glanced at the book in his hands. Wasn't that a 3-star magic tome? He nodded to confirm, yes, the Duke Duplain lent it to me. Hearing this, Reg was startled. Your father lent you that? He replied, yes, it's currently beyond my level, but studying it early won't hurt. Recalling what Duke Duplain once said, enough, he is a true mage. Upon hearing that, Reg understood the matter. I see, truly impressive. Then he returned to the main topic. So what is it regarding Miss Diella that brought you to me? Reg, a bit shy, began to explain, oh right, about that. Actually it's a bit complicated, but what do young ladies like these days? Faced with this odd question, he looked at him but didn't answer immediately. Reg continued on his own. If I sew a doll that looks like her, would she like it? Thinking of the doll that had been in Diella's room before, he answered decisively, certainly not. Sweat poured down Reg's face from embarrassment. Ah, right, well, I guess it would be like that. I'm not saying I'd make one or anything. Derek replied, yes, I think it's not worth expecting much. Should we head inside early if you finished practicing? Then he followed Reg into the manor. As the two moved, Reg spoke up. Anyway, I'm very grateful to you. The family's atmosphere has been very good lately. Even Valerian has focused on managing the domain, and father, though he doesn't show it, seems very pleased. He asked curiously, really? It's hard to read his feelings. Reg smiled and replied, everyone in this manor would agree with that. I suppose I should accept what I need to accept. People must change too, especially children of that age. I don't know if I failed to notice earlier or deliberately avoided it, but since Diella has changed, I think I should change as well. It's thanks to you, Derek, thank you. At this gratitude, he felt a little awkward. Ahead, Reg returned to the topic of Diella. By the way, Diella's magic feels like a different kind. He asked from behind, did you notice the difference? Reg answered, yes, it's like painting a picture. He thought to himself, a genius is still a genius, truly characteristic of the Duplains. Observing this, he nodded in confirmation, yes, Miss Diella uses the natural school of mana. Reg turned and replied, oh, the natural school, I have heard of it. He continued, each person's use of mana is very different. Once she reaches a certain trajectory, the truth will reveal itself without my need to explain anything. And at that level, a tutor's intervention could even become an obstacle. Understanding his point, Reg replied, I understand, at that level, her moment to shine will come. Cut to 2 months later, a small flower appeared on Diella's dressing table. She wondered, what's this? Why is there a flower? The servant behind replied, they're blooming so beautifully, I brought one to pin in the lady's hair. Holding the flower and inhaling its scent, Diella was very pleased. They're so fragrant, it feels like spring has been present for months. I can now use single-star magic comfortably, and I've also grown closer to the servants. Perhaps I've missed many things before. I think all of this is thanks to Master Derek. The servant replied, I was wondering why the lady looked so cheerful today. Is today a magic lesson? Diella answered, yes, do I look that happy? The servant took the flower and said, then I'll pin it beautifully. From outside, a teasing voice rang out, "Ah, save me an extra flower to give to Master Derek." The flower branch in her hand suddenly fell to the ground. Her eyes brimmed with tears. "What's the meaning of this, Derek?" He stood at her door with Valerian and explained, "As you heard, miss. I have nothing left to teach Miss Diella. The laws of the seasons are always like that. No winter lasts forever, nor does any spring endure eternally." Back in the Duke's study, he offered his assessment. "Perhaps you have noticed, but Miss Diella belongs to the natural school, and within that, her attributes are especially strong. If I continue to intervene in her affairs, I will only end up breaking her wings." As a mage himself, he understood his meaning. "I see. So you have no reason to remain at this manor any longer." He nodded in agreement. "Yes, that's right." He fell silent for a few seconds in thought. Then he rose from his chair, walked to the window, and began to open his heart. "Thanks to you, many things have changed. It's thanks to you that my daughter could mature. I was too absorbed in managing the domain to be a good father, but now I feel somewhat reassured." "So when will you leave?" He replied, "I heard Miss Azeline will soon visit the manor and then return to Ableston. I plan to leave with her carriage then." The Duke responded, "I understand. Will you return the library key?" He answered, "Yes, I will return the magic tomes I'm studying and hand the key to the steward." The Duke interrupted, "There's no need. Return the key right now." Saying this, he cast a thoughtful glance down at the magic book lying nearby. The Duke continued, "If there's nothing else, you may leave immediately." He seemed to have something more to say, but could not bring himself to speak. He immediately bowed in salute, then turned and departed. No sooner had he left the Duke's study than he encountered Diella. She had been waiting for him for some time. "Master came suddenly, and now you leave just as abruptly." He intended to interrupt Miss Diella, but it was unavoidable. She continued, "I know you won't listen, but I'll say it anyway." Her voice grew small. "Can't you stay?" He pondered for a few seconds, then stepped closer to her and began to explain as usual. "I will return to my life as a mercenary, and I will study many more spells. And once Miss Diella has acquired more skills, she will go to Ableston to be presented to the nobility, and then we can meet again. If my level rises a bit before then, I will be able to teach you some new things." "Are you comforting yourself?" Diella reproached. "How annoying. You are always right, so I have no retort." Cut to night. Diella now slept. In her dream, countless eyes turned toward her, mocking. "Diella, you're a useless child, utterly talentless. What do you have to be proud of besides your bloodline? You don't even possess a scrap of talent. You are the shame of House Duplain. You should never have been born." At that, her eyes suddenly flew open. Then she sat up terrified, shouting, "Impossible." She breathed rapidly to regain her composure. She stroked her head, reassuring herself that it had only been a nightmare. Hearing the commotion, a servant pushed the door open and entered. "Miss Diella, are you all right?" "I heard a scream. Did something happen?" She looked at the servant before her, thinking to herself, "What if I invent an excuse? Maybe I'll go back and slap her like before, lose my temper and cause a scene. Then Master Derek would stay here for me, right?" Seeing she didn't answer, the servant asked anxiously, "Miss Diella, are you all right? Do you feel unwell anywhere?" Deep inside, she was undergoing a fierce inner struggle. After a moment, she replied, "No," she thought to herself, "I won't do things like that anymore." She smiled brightly, "I'm fine, so don't worry." She continued, thinking that doing that wouldn't make her any more valuable. Cut to the next day. A new day had begun at the manor. Early that morning, Azeline's carriage was already waiting outside. Seeing him, she said, "Would it be all right if I let you off in the market district?" He did not refuse. "Yes, I'd be grateful if you did." She smiled. "Say your goodbyes, we'll depart soon." He then turned to look at the people who had been with him all this time. Only Diella kept avoiding his gaze. Valerian looked at him, puzzled. "So you really are leaving?" He replied, "I must return to where I belong." Rhaeg added from beside him, "Life at the manor mustn't have been easy for you. You've worked very hard. If anything happens, remember to contact me. I'll help as I can." Touched by their kindness, he bowed and replied, "Thank you, sirs." Then he turned his gaze toward Diella. She too was staring at him. The two remained silent for a long moment. Then Diella shouted, "How can you look at me like that? Do you think I'll beg you not to go? Don't get the wrong idea. I am not a child anymore." This pleased him greatly. He straightened and said, "Teaching you has been an honor. I can't proudly proclaim myself your tutor, but I hope you'll remember the spells you learned with me." Diella snorted in reply, "Excuse me, but I will proudly declare that you are my tutor. You won't live in peace anymore anyway. After all, you'll be the tutor of the great Diella Catherine Duplain." After that, there was a silence. Seeing him still staring, she looked away shyly, her voice edged with reproach. "Take care, don't do reckless, dangerous things and get hurt," he cautioned. "I'll be fine. You shouldn't overexert yourself either." Diella said confidently, "I'm an adult now. I can take care of myself." Those words felt very familiar to him. because they were the same words he once told his master. You're grown now, you can take care of yourself. His master then gently came forward and embraced him. Derek, remember what I say. Back in the present, he called softly Miss Diella. He leaned in, placed a hand on her head, and reminded her that she didn't need to grow up so early. That remark struck the girl's heart, and she couldn't hold back tears. But she forced herself to regain her confidence, waved cheerfully, and said, "See you, Derek." He politely bowed in return. "See you in Ableston, Miss Diella." Cut to the afternoon. He had arrived at the Ableston Market District. He opened the door and stepped into his familiar tavern. Their Pelling was pounding a fat man senseless. The crowd behind her cheered loudly. That's right, kill him, beat him to a pulp. Noticing someone had entered, she unleashed a decisive punch. Then she turned and smiled, calling his name Derek. He took off his hat and smiled, "I'm home." Cut to the next day at the Belden Tavern. Inside, Jaden began, "It may not compare to noble tea, but this is my favorite mead. Consider it a coming-out party. It's on me." He replied cheerfully, "Thanks." Seeing his demeanor, Pelling turned annoyed. Why do you look so pale? Working at a noble's manor has made you so fair. I thought those nobles took something by mistake when they hired you as a magic tutor, so what's the truth? Tell us a bit. He was lazy to explain. "I just want to work, there's nothing special to tell." Pelling continued to tease, "Oh, why do you sound so noble? Can't you share a little without dying?" Jaden soothed her. Pelling, "Pipe down and drink this." Interrupted, she was a little annoyed. So irritating. When he was away, I had to take all the work and nearly exhausted myself." He looked at him and added, "Didn't Derek bring back a pile of money?" "They paid as agreed, right?" He replied, "More than money, I gained something far more important." Saying that, he produced a magic tome and set it on the table. Examining the book, Jaden assessed, "What's this? Is it a 2-star grimoire?" Pelling was also surprised. "Wow, something this valuable." While they were still stunned, he continued, "Not that, this is a 3-star grimoire." This made them startled. Pelling asked, "Did you steal it? If you're caught, your head will roll." "Oh, please, steal it. It's 3-star. I want to steal one too. Where is it?" He replied calmly, "The Duke granted it to me." These implausible words irked Pelling. "You don't brag. Did they even need a tutor there? Answer me." The barrage of questions left him a bit tired. He looked out the window. The sky had turned to midnight. Jaden was busy cleaning the tavern. Then he turned and asked, "Any new jobs lately?" He replied, "Back a day and already wanting work." He said confidently, "Yes, if it's light work, I feel my edge has dulled a bit." This amused Jaden. "Really, you, of all people, know your instincts are dulling. Magic users are always short on work. If you want, there's more than you can handle." He proposed, "Then start tomorrow. Find me the earliest job you can, please." Cut to the next day, he and Pelling sat on a carriage leaving the town. Their job that day was monster hunting. After a struggle, they killed a goblin. Then they had to face a swarm of giant spiders. Thus a long day passed. They returned to the carriage to prepare to camp for the night. While Pelling slept drunk, he slipped out of his bed. He went out to the nearby clearing and began practicing magic. Gradually, he felt power spreading through his body. He stretched out his hand and formed a small crystal, but it held tremendous power. Its power was too great, and it hurled him backward. Then a large explosion occurred, shaking the entire forest. He slowly sat up, looked at his arm, and sighed with fatigue. Although he had grasped most of the key points of 2-star magic, this 3-star barrier was truly too high. In no time, summer passed and autumn arrived. And then winter. The tavern door opened. He and Pelling came inside. Pelling was shivering violently from the cold. How cold is it going to get? Seeing them return, Jaden praised them. "You came back late. Did you cross the weather like that to the Kent range?" Pelling scolded, "Really? I told you to wait until it warmed up before going." Taking the loot bag, Jaden praised, "Only crazies like you would go beheading harpies in this weather." Derek nodded in reply, "Thanks." Pelling on the side was enjoying the warmth from a hot cloth. Nice. He turned back to the two of them and said, "Exhausted like this, you should rest tomorrow." "There's a job that suits you, Derek," he asked. "What kind of job is it?" The man smiled. "It's light work with high pay, though a bit troublesome." Cut to the next day. As he walked, he thought to himself, this request came from the Rohul Mercenary Company in the West. You've probably heard of them, the Belmeard Count family. They seem to be looking for commoners to serve as opponents for magic practice. In other words, they need a human-shaped stand-in to vent on. You just go there and let them hit you a few times. After a long journey, he arrived at the noble's magic arena. Inside, Ellen was walking with a bald old man. She asked, "Who am I fighting today?" He replied, "Today we've prepared a commoner for the lady to practice offensive magic on." This made her somewhat displeased. "What, you tell me to fight a commoner?" He affirmed, "This is also part of training, milady. We promise to pay him a fair fee, so please practice to your heart's content." She replied in frustration, "Is that so? The so-called training is really just using noble status to bully commoners." He explained, "But at least he's a 1-star mage." She continued, even the professor is about to reach 2 stars. Isn't the gap between 1 star and 2 star huge? Elsewhere, Derek was changing his clothes to prepare for work. A figure approached and he looked up. Ellen stepped forward and asked, "Is it you, the opponent I'll face today?" He bowed and replied, "My name is Derek." She introduced herself too. Ellen then thought to herself, Derek, this name sounds familiar. I feel like I've heard it somewhere. The bald man pointed toward the training ground and ordered, "All right, please step onto the arena." She kept watching him closely. Is this guy really a mage? He looks so childish. The two of them then stepped onto the training ground together. She said, "Very well then, do you know the basic rules of magical duels?" He answered, "Yes, I know a little." This pleased her somewhat. "Good, then resist with everything you've got. I'll try to finish quickly." She calculated inwardly, even though I'm forced to do this, if I use a shockwave to knock him off the floor it should end quickly. Suddenly he asked, "Resist with everything, how far should I go?" The unexpected question left her a bit flustered. What are you talking about?" He explained, "I need to know how hard I should resist to be of help to Lady Ellen." Hearing this, the bald man shook his head in some helplessness. But that made Ellen excited. "You're talking nonsense. I've told you, resist with all your power." Derek fell silent for a few seconds, then began channeling mana into his arm. "Very well, I'll indulge the lady's wish." She on the other side also began channeling mana around her body. She stretched her arm forward, mumbling ancient incantations. She thought, that common brat deserves praise for reaching 1 star at his age, but he's far too arrogant. I'll show him the wall that separates nobles and commoners. She chanted once more. As soon as she finished, she fired a mana bolt straight at him. The sudden attack did not disturb his usual calm. As the bolt approached, he merely slipped to the side, evading it with ease. The bolt then struck a distant tree, splitting its trunk in two. The scene unfolding in an instant surprised Ellen. He calmly said from across, "What's your next attack?" She was a little angry, cursing inwardly. This brat seems to have reason for his confidence. But that doesn't mean the gap between us will vanish. Saying that, she muttered other incantations. Countless magic arrows rose up from the ground into the air. They moved as if sentient under her control. She pointed her finger directly at him and commanded, "Finish it with this strike." On his side, he didn't rush to dodge, but immediately fired a beam of magic. His mana bolt easily shattered her magic arrows with precision. Then it flew straight toward her, signaling an unrestrained counterattack. She began calculating inwardly. It's a simple spell, yet he can control it to this degree. The bald man watching from outside was secretly excited. "Ha, for a commoner his skill is excellent. The rumors about him may not be unfounded." Ellen's anger surged to its peak. She chanted another incantation. "I admit I underestimated you. This time I'll attack seriously." Seeing the mana radiating from these arrows, Derek hesitated. She'd changed tactics. She wasn't trying to hit him, but to blast the entire arena. For a noble, that level of adaptation was fairly impressive. She raised her arm high. Tens of thousands of arrows shot up into the sky, forming a massive rain of arrows aimed straight at him. Seeing that, he immediately assessed that he could not dodge this attack. Immediately, he dropped to one knee and began summoning a layer of magic protection. Countless arrows slammed into the barrier, producing piercing screeches. The repeated impacts filled the surrounding space with smoke and dust. After the smoke cleared, he emerged from the haze without any injuries. But his gaze froze at the scene ahead, because Ellen had seized the opening and rushed in, preparing to launch the next attack. He quickly assessed the situation. An arrow at such close range couldn't be dodged, nor could a barrier be raised in time. Her talent was truly insane. At that moment he snapped his fingers. The space around them suddenly flashed with blinding light. Her eyes couldn't open, making Ellen furious. "Damn it, my eyes." She still tried to move forward, slowly opening her eyes. She scanned around but couldn't see him anywhere. She cursed inwardly, "Where did that bastard go? I can't see anything." She told herself to focus. "Concentrate, Ellen, listen carefully, and I can react in time if I can find his position." Just then, she felt something brush past her face. What just brushed past? I didn't hear any sound, don't tell me. At that moment, the image of Derek appeared before her. Countless mana bullets surrounded him. Without hesitation, he launched a barrage of mana bullets at her at extreme speed, forcing her to struggle to dodge. She immediately realized illusion magic had erased the sound. He even anticipated that she'd rely on hearing. So that first attack missed. Did he dare hold back against me? She cursed under her breath as she defended herself. No way. Suddenly he lunged forward, catching her off guard. He's closing the distance. Idiot, deploying high-speed magic is my specialty. Focus, Ellen. The moment magic appears from his hand, I'll strike first and end the match. But at that instant, he suddenly changed his action. He stamped the ground hard, pushing her backward. From the soles of his feet, countless streaks of lightning began to appear. She immediately realized his toes were deploying magic. The sudden attack forced her to struggle to defend. The bald man observing outside thought silently, "Impressive. The kid seems of the natural school, but I can't read his mana flow." From the orthodox schools equal's perspective, it's hard to keep up. Panting on the ground, Ellen said, he truly is an interesting brat. She stood up, stepped toward him, and said honestly, at first I underestimated you and thought you were just a braggart. She closed in, bent slightly, and continued, but you've taught me something interesting. So thank you. Saying that, she channeled mana into her feet and began to cast magic. Facing this sudden attack, he immediately put his hand forward to block the force. Then he deftly guided the flow of the attack. The strike was redirected, turning back to attack Ellen, the chosen trajectory forcing her backward. Immediately, he lunged forward with another attack forming in his hand. His eyes were full of determination as he charged straight at his opponent, and Ellen looked at him with a gaze of astonishment mixed with fear.